Have you ever felt like you're standing on the very edge of a high dive, staring at the water down below, just desperately waiting for that sudden surge of courage to finally jump? You know the feeling, right? You read all the books, you draft up the perfect plans, you listen to all the expert advice, but you never actually step off the edge. You just spend years, literally years, waiting for certainty, waiting for motivation, or waiting for that magical perfect moment. Well, today in this explainer, we're going to completely dismantle that mindset. Let's get right into it. Because I want you to think about this. What if the reason you're stuck isn't because you're not ready, but because you're waiting to feel ready? This is a massive contradiction in how we're all taught to pursue success. We just kind of assume that readiness is a feeling, like a green light that suddenly flips on in our brains. We think we need permission or an absolute, ironclad guarantee of success before we even begin. But what if everything you've ever been taught about preparation is completely backwards? By the end of this explainer, you are going to understand exactly why that perfect moment never arrives, and more importantly, what the world's most successful people do instead of waiting around for it.
So let's start with part 1, the illusion of readiness.
The problem most of us experience is that we set these incredibly massive, overarching goals. We want to be a master public speaker, a successful entrepreneur, an elite athlete. But when you stare at a massive goal like that, it honestly doesn't motivate you. Instead, it creates total paralysis. You look at that incredible gap between where you are today and where you want to be, and it's terrifying. Your brain immediately says, whoa, I can't do that yet. I'm definitely not prepared. And honestly, nothing makes us feel more unready for those big goals than the number 10,000. You've probably heard of the famous 10,000-hour rule, right? The idea that it takes 10,000 hours of practice to become world-class at any complex skill. Now, while it's true that mastery takes a ton of time, looking at the staggering requirement makes us feel permanently unready to even start. I mean, when you're standing at hour 0, 10,000 hours feels like an impossible mountain. It's so intimidating that it makes you feel like you need an absolutely flawless plan before you invest that kind of time.
Which leads us to a really fascinating paradox. Why do smart people stay stuck? You would think that the most intelligent, capable individuals out there would be the absolute fastest to progress. But what most people don't realize is that often the exact opposite is true. Smart people are great at anticipating problems. They are fantastic at researching. And because they fully grasp the sheer volume of work required, they easily fall into the trap of confusing preparation with procrastination. They study the mountain so much that they literally never take the first step up the trail.
But here is where everything changes. What you need to realize is that confidence isn't required to start, it's earned by starting. This is the hidden truth. Confidence is not something you magically possess before you act, it is the direct byproduct of taking action. The people who make the most extraordinary progress in life aren't necessarily the most naturally talented, and they aren't the most intelligent. They are simply the ones who are willing to begin long before they feel ready. Action creates clarity. You cannot think your way into feeling confident. You absolutely have to act your way into it.
This brings us to part 2, the practice trap. So when people finally do decide to take action, a lot of them immediately fall into a massive trap. They just go through the motions. On the left side here, we have mindless repetition. This is where you're basically just logging hours. You show up, you play the guitar, you write some code, you go for a run, but there's no specific focus. You're just putting in time. On the right side, however, we have deliberate action. This is highly focused, very specific skill building. You see, you can't just put in 10,000 hours of mindless repetition and expect to become great. Think about it. If you type on a keyboard with terrible posture and just 2 fingers for 10,000 hours, you don't become a master typist. You just become a master of typing badly. Real progress requires deliberate action.
Let's look closer at how this works in part 3, the hidden mechanism. To really understand the secret engine of true progress, we have to look at how top performers approach their craft. They don't do it by obsessing over the finish line. Not at all. They do it by zooming in on something incredibly small. Picture a 9-year-old boy in his front yard, learning how to pitch a baseball with his dad. They aren't throwing fastballs. They aren't even playing a game. Instead, the father is walking him through one tiny, specific mechanic, the backswing of the arm. The entire cue is just 2 words, elbow up. For an entire practice session, they repeat a single movement of about 12 inches, hands apart, arm swings back, elbow up, hundreds of times. They do not care about the rest of the pitch. They don't worry about striking out a batter. They literally spend days just focusing on getting that elbow into the right position until it's completely automatic.
What that father and son were doing right there is called deliberate progress. It's the act of breaking down a massive goal into an intensely focused, microscopic step that can be mastered quickly. That young baseball player wasn't waiting around to feel ready to pitch a perfect game in front of a stadium. He was only focused on mastering a 12-inch movement. And here's the magic of this. When you break a task down to this microscopic level, readiness just ceases to be a problem. You don't need to feel ready to conquer the entire world. You only need to feel ready to lift your elbow.
Which naturally leads us to part 4, the anatomy of mastery.
Let's break down a highly intimidating task together to show exactly how this hidden mechanism actually works. If you have ever felt totally overwhelmed by a new skill, this breakdown is for you. Take a really complex physical movement, something like the clean and jerk in Olympic weightlifting. If you look at an Olympian lifting hundreds of pounds over their head, it looks completely impossible. But look at this sequence. Step 1, you don't even touch real weights. You spend a whole session just learning the fundamentals of the hook grip on the bare bar. Step 2, the next session, you practice the movement phases using nothing but a wooden broomstick. Step 3, you spend days just experimenting with your foot position. Step 4, you learn the set posture, maybe spending a whole day just figuring out how to keep your shoulders pulled back correctly. It's really only by step 5, after many sessions, that you finally lift the bar off the floor. A massive, intimidating goal is really just a cumulative sequence of tiny, non-intimidating micro-actions.
And the reality is, get the fundamentals right, and they help you every single time. Get them wrong, and every task suffers. Beginners almost always overestimate the importance of the final, flashy result, and they vastly underestimate the fundamentals. They want to skip the broomstick entirely and go straight to the heavy weights because they're eager to feel like they're making real progress. But the hidden cost of skipping the basics just to get to the fun part is that your entire foundation becomes totally unstable. You absolutely must master the microscopic steps first.
And that sets up part 5 perfectly, the 1 to 3 rule. This is honestly one of the most powerful concepts you can use right now, today, to stop waiting and start acting. It completely resolves the overwhelming tension of that 10,000-hour rule we talked about earlier. Simply 1 to 3. What does this actually mean? Well, it means that true deliberate practice happens when you work on a sub-skill that requires only 1 to 3 practice sessions to master. Think about how incredibly liberating that is. You don't need to be ready for the next 10 years of your life. You only need to be ready for a tiny, specific behavior that you can completely conquer in a day or two.
So here is your golden rule. If it takes longer than 3 sessions, the task is too complex. Break it down. If you ever feel stuck, if you ever feel that old familiar creeping feeling of, I don't think I'm ready yet, realize that it is simply a diagnostic signal. That's all it is. It means the step you are currently looking at is just way too big. Slice it in half, then slice it again. Just keep slicing it until it becomes a tiny, specific task that you can absolutely master in just 1 to 3 focus sessions.
And to keep yourself completely on track, use this actionable checklist. Top performers constantly, and I mean constantly, ask themselves these 3 questions for deliberate action. First, do I understand the fundamentals? Because no matter how advanced you get, you literally never outgrow the basics. Second, am I working on the next step? Look, a lot of people know what the next step is, but never take it, or they just waste time working on random, disjointed skills that don't build upon each other cumulatively. And third, what am I missing? Asking this keeps you humble and hungry. It keeps you constantly looking for new information and real growth.
Finally, we arrive at part 6. The process is the prize. As we near the end of our explainer today, let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. When you actually implement the 1 to 3 rule and you actively stop waiting for the illusion of total readiness, your entire relationship with your goals shifts. Expertise is not a finish line that can be crossed. It's a process to be embraced. One of the absolute greatest pitfalls of feeling unready is believing that success is a final destination. We tell ourselves, oh, once I cross that finish line, then I will finally feel confident. But expertise isn't a race you eventually win. It's a continuous, daily process of small, extremely deliberate steps. When you realize that the perfect moment will simply never arrive, you realize that right now, today, is literally the only moment you have to take that first microscopic step. Confidence comes after you start. So, I want to leave you with a powerful, provocative reflection. What is one thing you've been postponing because you don't feel ready yet? Seriously, what opportunity are you actively avoiding? What belief is holding you back from your next level of growth? I want you to take that big, scary thing, break it all the way down into a tiny step that takes just 1 to 3 sessions to master, and start it today. I would really love to hear your answers, so please let me know down in the comments below. And if you found value in this explainer, subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who needs to hear this. Don't wait until you're ready, start now.